Hello fellow Aussians, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched Wicked. Yeah, let's talk about it. So Wicked is directed by John Cho, who also directed Crazy Rich Asians, which, by the way, we are long overdue a sequel for Hollywood, but I digress. It is, of course, a live action adaptation of the world famous stage musical that has been running on Broadway, on the West End, and beyond for over 20 years now. So many of you guys should already know the backstory to this film and the stage musical, but if you don't already, it is a prequel to one of the most classic films of all time, The Wizard of Oz. Both the stage musical and the film tell the story of Oz before Dorothy ever arrived many years back, when both Glinda and the Wicked Witch of the West, who was originally known as Elphaba, went to school together. It turns out that they used to be friends, but they had a very complicated relationship back in their school days. And so in this film, we see a flash forward to what ends up happening, as we already know, from the end of The Wizard of Oz. But then we also get the flashback as Glinda, or as she became known as Glinda, tells the story of how her and Elphaba met, how they used to be roommates in school and they were rivals initially, and then afterwards things got a little bit more complicated when Elphaba discovered the true nature of her powers, and more importantly, how the wizard really intended to use them. So it's kind of a villain origin story, but we realize that the Wicked Witch of the West was never the villain that we thought she was, judging off of the events of The Wizard of Oz. She was far more complex and multifaceted, had a very sad, tragic childhood, and it was all to do with this ostracization that she experienced as a result of her green skin. Now, aside from the already fascinating insight into the classic characters from the world of The Wizard of Oz, we also have this underlying theme of a rise of fascism in Oz, pretty much, as we see the animals that exist in this society start to be treated in worse and worse ways. And this is kind of like an allegory for the rise, like I said, of fascism, of Nazism, the sort of things that we saw in the early 20th century that may be rising again now. And so this story functions on two levels. We have a very personal and intimate story of sisterhood between Elphaba and Glinda as they get to know each other, they become friends, but that is further complicated by the motives of those above them, and also the way that society treats Elphaba just by looking at her viridian skin. But on the flip side, we have these more macro issues dealing with the society of Oz, which is of course designed to hold a mirror to our own societies and the discrimination and hatred that reside within them. So the story is tackling a lot. The story is tackling so much, which is why they decided to split this story into two parts, with this year's film actually being a part one, and part two is set to be released next year. So already we have a chunky runtime of 2 hours and a half for just the first part of this story, even though the stage musical is done all in one piece for a good, what is it, like 3 hours or so? So they're definitely stretching things out, definitely further exploring these themes that come about more fleetingly in the stage musical, and giving them more air to breathe with these increased runtimes for these two parts. And I, for one, think that that is an overwhelmingly positive thing for this franchise, I guess, because I find these themes, the storylines, these characters so fascinating that I wouldn't want to see them rushed. I like the fact that they're really tackling them properly and giving them the time and space to be fully explored. I was really intrigued by the way that they set up the story storyline surrounding the animals and the way that they've started to become treated in the society of Oz, despite being the founders of this city before the wizard even came around. Well, the wizard, as we know, if you've watched The Wizard of Oz, is just a simple human. Like, he is a simpleton. He is no one special. Sure, he can like tweak some things and invent whatever, but he is not this all-powerful wizard that he portrays himself to be. But upon arriving at Oz, he saw the opportunity to reinvent himself, and so he's made himself into a god. But even he, this god, is not immune to the backwards thinking of the society of his origin, because he's brought with him to Oz all of the hang-ups, the discriminatory and problematic attitudes that we have towards animals, and just more widely towards people who don't fit within a certain box. He's brought all of that baggage to Oz, and that is reflected in how he treats the animals, which, like I said, is a wider allegory for what we see in our societies. So very, very fascinating stuff, and I'm glad that they're not trying to rush through that. They set it up nicely in this first film because it is a very powerful and intriguing theme, and it looks like they really want to do it justice. Now, that is of course only the second storyline, because we have the first story that is centered on Elphaba and Glinda, and so much can be said about that story, so much can be dissected, but I don't want to fall into the trap of just retelling the story. I feel like I've kind of been doing that a little bit in my reviews, and I'm trying to course correct. So all I'll say is, overall, when it comes to the story, the way that it was retold in this live action on-screen adaptation, wow. Literally wow. I can't fault it. I cannot find fault in the way that they adapted the story of Wicked. Now, mind you, I've actually seen the stage musical. I saw it in the West End. It was the first ever West End show that I saw because it's so classic and it's so well known. So I was like, man, I have a couple of P's. I got some change now. Let me actually buy a theatre ticket and see Wicked for the first time. And this was a few years back. And so I went, and I was dressed in green, and I was really excited. And honestly, like, it was good. Honestly, it was good. But it didn't like blow my mind, I'll be honest. Like, I'm not like a Wicked girly. I felt like it was a really impressive show, but like I said, it wasn't one that like completely blew my mind, blew me away, and I kind of felt like it was a tad overrated, especially considering how long it's gone on for and how people rave about the show, and it's always sold out. Like, I was just expecting more. Now, since then, I have seen more West End shows, and that I have actually been blown away by, and so I know that the medium isn't the problem. The fact that it's a musical on stage isn't the issue. It's just the show itself didn't wow me. And to be fair, for that first ever theatre show that I saw in the West End, I did get a seat that was not optimum. So I was quite far away, and I think that definitely impacted my enjoyment of that show. And since then, I've always made sure to stay in the stalls, okay? Stay nice and close, especially with my visual impairment, so that I can get maximum enjoyment of the shows that I watch in the theatre. But all of that is to say that going into this, I didn't have the highest of high expectations, because I'd already seen the show and I just wasn't as blown away by it as many other people have been all across the world. So I hold my hand up and say that I'm in the minority, but that was the fact. And so, having seen this film and seeing how they did adapt that story, I would say they did the best that they could. Like I said, I cannot fault it. It was seamless. It was incredible. And I actually think that the story lent itself even better to this new medium of cinema. Have you heard of it? I think that the story, and we'll get to the sets and everything else, but the whole package lent itself even better to the screen than it did to the stage. And of course, the fact that the story of the stage musical could be so well adapted for the screen speaks to the strength of the script, the strength of the playwright, because it was a seamless adaptation that was even more enjoyable on the big screen. Okay, so now that I delved into my thoughts on the story overall, let's get into the characters. Let's get into the characters. Guys, Oscars need to be won. Oscars need to be won. Every single actor in this film was actoring for their lives. Like, I don't know what John Chu was doing over there. I don't know. He was running that set like the Marines, clearly, because every single person that showed up for their jobs, that showed up on set, was ready to work. They were put through their paces. It feels like it's been ages since I've seen a whole cast radiate charisma the way that I did in this movie. And I had plenty of positive things to say about the cast of Gladiator 2, and I still stand by those things, absolutely. But like this cast right here, this cast right here, all I can say is that the whole time I was thinking, man, they are giving it their absolute all. They are giving this everything, and I am loving every single second of it. Okay, so first of all, let's start off with the queen. Let's start off with the icon, the legend herself, Miss Cynthia Erivo as Elphaba. Standing ovation. I would stand if I could, but I'm wearing pajama bottoms. Standing ovation for Cynthia. She ate. She absolutely bodied this role. She was born to play this character. Now, I will say, as a little caveat, okay, it wouldn't be me if I didn't mention this, but when I first saw the trailers, when I first saw that this film was coming out, I did have a bit of a raised eyebrow at the fact that Cynthia, a black actress, would be portraying Elphaba, a character who is all in green, and that in itself wouldn't be an issue, of course, because that is true to the stage musical and of course to the Wizard of Oz original film. But we know, those of us who have been paying attention know, that Hollywood, unfortunately, has adopted a very despicable, trend or habit of painting characters of color or turning them into various different animals or creatures, or basically transforming them in ways that kind of rips away their racial identity. It's extremely problematic, and it has been noticed. It has been noted by many of us, not just me. And so, yeah, my eyebrow did kind of raise when I saw that first trailer, because I was like, here we go again. And unfortunately, we have far too many examples of this from previous projects for it to be ignored here. But in this instance, I understand it's true to the stage musical, and the fact that we do have a black actress embodying the character of Elphaba is really nice to see. And I wish I could celebrate more if it wasn't for that pesky habit that Hollywood has shown in previous projects. But anywho, I don't want to rip away any credit from Cynthia Erivo, because she absolutely nailed absolutely bodied this role in ways that I can barely comprehend even 3 days after seeing this film. Okay, so first of all, the character of Elphaba is the richest character in the story, as you can imagine. We're dealing with an iteration of one of the earliest and most iconic villainous characters ever to be put on screen. Ever. Literally ever in the history of Hollywood. So the shoes, the witchy shoes were huge to fill. But on top of this, you have a stage musical that obviously, as I said, has a huge reputation behind it, and it presents us with a different version of the character that is far more multifaceted, has far more layers to her, and explores the complexities of her situation, considering the fact that she did have a very troublesome childhood, where the minute she was born, she was ostracized from society at large, but also from her own family, and her father, or, you know, stepfather in this case, hated her pretty much from birth and wanted her hidden away. And then when her sister was born, because her father was trying so hard to prevent another Elphaba from being born, he put his wife and his unborn child in danger by making her drink that special tea thing situation, kind of like Alicent from House of the Dragon. They must have gone to the same place. And so unfortunately, her little sister ends up having some disabilities, and that's just yet another person who is going to be treated differently in society. But you see how her father treats the two girls differently, and that obviously has an impact on Elphaba. Not to mention, all of this caused the death of both of the girls' mother. So that's a lot of baggage. That's a lot of baggage and grief and pathos, and the kind of older sister role that Elphaba is put into, where she has to take care of her younger sister, despite there being a little bit of resentment there because of the different way that she is treated by their father. All of that presents emotions and complexities that are just ripe for the taking. And Cynthia, with her clawed fingernails, just grabs all of it and just gobbles it up and eats it up. She delivers on all fronts when it comes to conveying these complex emotions, the struggle that the character feels, but also the veil, the shield of confidence and nonchalance and power that the character has had to develop in order to face the world, despite all of the issues that she faces inside. And this is all before Elphaba even steps foot into Shears University, Shears University, where she encounters GUH-linda, who becomes her new enemy, and they just hate each other. And so you have this like hatred and loathing being explored, and Elphaba kind of has to navigate that because GUH-linda represents everything that she isn't. She's her polar opposite. She is the epitome of the standard of beauty in their society, at least amongst humans, I'm guessing, and she's, you know, so beautiful, so perfect, so popular. And we even get a little snippet of GUH-linda and her relationship with her parents, and that's everything that Elphaba doesn't have back home. And so Elphaba has to kind of confront that polar opposite person, and that gives Cynthia a lot of room to play around with that relationship as well. And that of course changes when they become friends and they become allies. And then you get to see a softer side to her. It also changes when she's introduced to Fiyero, and then ultimately in the final act, when everything goes to shiz, it changes once again when you have those boundaries be put up again, just full force, you know, that shield that she's been building up her entire life after facing so much strife for just the way that she looks and the way that she was born, that is fortified even more when she is chased out of Oz. So what an incredible journey for this character already in just the first part of this story, and Cynthia was able to nail every single beat. Like, honestly, like I said, Oscars need to be won. Oscars, or at least Genie Awards, need to be won. But then we move over to Elphaba's sister. Elphaba's sister from another mister, Miss Ariana Grande, aka GUH-linda, aka Glinda, aka like okay, whatever that goat teacher would call her. Wow, guys, I'm not even gonna. In the case of Ariana, you could just tell that she wanted this and she wasn't taking any goddamn chances. And honestly, I just have to applaud her for that. I just have to applaud her for that, because she gave this role her absolute all. She gave it everything, and I was in awe of her performance in this film. Now, I of course grew up with a little bit of Ariana, watching Victorious. I was more of a Disney Channel girly myself, but I did check out quite a few, like a big chunk of Victorious episodes, and so I was familiar with her game. And it always kind of gagged me how everyone else in the cast was far more gifted and talented than Tori herself. I was like, why is she so mundane in comparison? Even in my young age, I was so confused because I knew that Ariana Grande, aka Kat, was super talented and had an out of this world voice. So I was like, how come she isn't the protagonist? And then I would switch back over to Disney Channel and watch another episode of That's So Raven. Like that's pretty much what my thought process would be. And then, you know, obviously she became a huge star, and I don't listen to a lot of her songs, I'll be honest. I listen to the more like more popular ones, including Popular Song, which I used to be obsessed with. I used to listen to Popular Song by Mika featuring a young Ariana so many times in the day, to the point where when I finally did go to see the Wicked show and they did Popular on stage, I was like, oh, I didn't realize that the Mika song was actually a cover of the original song from Wicked. But anywho, I don't tend to listen to a lot of Ariana's music apart from the bigger hits. And the main reason for that is because I had an issue with the way that she sung, and not with the quality of her voice, please. Like, she is so talented, but mostly with her enunciation. Mostly with her enunciation. People like to make fun of SZA for her cursive singing, but if SZA's singing is cursive, then Ariana's is just a straight line. Like, I can't hear a word that this girlie is saying. She sounds heavenly, she sounds incredible, but I can't understand any of her lyrics. And even though I'm not like too bogged down about that oftentimes, it does get a little bit annoying when the whole time it's just like, I'm just like, this sounds incredible but illegible. But regardless of my thoughts on Ariana Grande's discography, I cannot deny that she was absolutely born for this role. And I can imagine that she's wanted to play the role of GUH-linda for a very long time. And, you know, even back in the day when she had Popular Song with Mika, I'm sure she was dreaming of a day where she got to play this role either on screen or on stage. And you can just tell that she wanted to give it 1000%, and that's exactly what she did. She embodied this character so perfectly. She had a genuine joy and quirkiness and silliness to her performance, which apparently harkens back to the famous iteration of the character from Kristen Chenoweth, even down to the hair flipping, which apparently was a Kristen special back in the day. But I think Ariana embodied those elements so perfectly for this character. And I was honestly surprised because she is such a huge, gargantuan star in her own right. And so I guess I kind of expected her to be a little bit more reserved, a little bit more kind of like, yeah, I'm that girl, I'm not gonna do too much. But no, she did too much and then some. And it was incredible. She matched the energy and vibe that you'd come to expect from a stage musical and a filmed musical. And I was just so glad. She didn't have any arrogance to her. She had a lot of humility and silliness and relatability in her performance, and it was just note perfect. Speaking of notes, the singing, we'll talk about the singing in a second, but the singing was definitely improved from her earlier tracks that I listened to. I think she did a stint on Broadway, which helped her enunciate her words while singing a little bit better. And even though it wasn't always perfect for every single song, it was definitely a huge improvement because I can actually hear a lot of the lyrics, especially for Popular. You could tell sis was practicing that. She said, I ain't taking no chances. And I completely applaud her for that because her performance of Popular was note perfect. Now, the role of GUH-linda is fascinating, but also kind of tricky because whilst we've become accustomed to seeing more multifaceted villains, you know, that are misunderstood and have a complex backstory, right? Like we've seen a lot of that in blockbuster filmmaking, especially in comic book movies. And so we're used to that kind of story, but we're not as used to seeing someone who's presented as a hero actually turn out to be a dickhead. Like we're We're not actually as accustomed to that. And so that's where the role of Glinda becomes interesting, right? Because in the original Wizard of Oz movie, she's presented as, you know, the Witch of the East, is she? I can't remember. But she's presented as this like goddess, kind of princess-like figure. She is the good to the Wicked Witch's evil. Whereas here, with the story of Wicked, we see that actually she's a little bit, there's more to her. She's manipulative, she's disingenuous, she is narcissistic as hell. Narcissistic as hell. Everything she does has an ulterior motive. It's all about the way that she is perceived by others, and she doesn't seem to care about other people from a place of genuine kindness. Like, it's all about how she's perceived by others. That motivates a lot of what she does, and she's very self-serving. And the fact that Ariana had to kind of toe that line, right, between being vapid and self-centered and kind of evil, if you think about it, to still being redeemable, still being likable, kind of relatable, and just kind of nice and kind on occasion. Like, that is a very tough line to toe, and she managed to do it perfectly. I applaud both of these ladies. I think they did their thing, and that's just individually, because when they came together, oh, the on-screen chemistry. The on-screen chemistry between Ariana and Cynthia was like out of this world. And I've been following the press tour, the world's longest press tour, the world's largest press tour for a film, actually. I've been following along bits and bobs, and I've seen their interviews together, and they just seem so in sync. But that absolutely translates to the screen, which is why I go back to what I said about John Chu, because what was he doing on that set? Like, he was running that set like the Marines. Now, in terms of the wider cast, everyone was note perfect here. I mean, shout out to Anthony Bridgerton himself. Anthony Bridgerton himself. This man literally has chemistry with everyone. It's insane, because Anthony Bridgerton is, of course, Fiyero. Prince Fiyero, who is, of course, portrayed by the iconic, indelible Jonathan Bailey. And he is this wild, troublesome, rule-breaking prince who's been kicked out of all the other schools, and he comes over to Shiz University. That name is so hilarious. Shiz University to cause mayhem and trouble there. And you see Glinda immediately fall for him, perhaps on a superficial level, because they're both the archetypical beautiful people in their societies, and so it just makes sense for them to come together. But even still, even when he is courting Glinda, in actuality he has chemistry with every single person in the room. He has his introductory song where he's going around the room and just flirting with everyone, and you can just see everyone turn into a puddle. You can see everyone turn into a puddle in Jonathan Bailey's presence, because like that's just the presence, that's just the charisma that he has. Wow. But just like with our main protagonist, when you dig a little bit deeper into Prince Fiyero, you see that he does have a few more layers to him than you first realize. He's not just this kind of showboat who's superficial and doesn't care about anything, as shown by the fact that he rescued that cub from the cage that he was put in, and he ran away with Elphaba, and she's pretty much the only one who can see the deeper layers that he has. And so they have a connection on that front, which is obviously gonna cause mayhem and disruption in the second movie, and I'm not looking forward to that conversation, because I know it's not the priority, okay? It's not the priority whatsoever. But to add man troubles to this shiz show is just too much. It's just too much. So not another love triangle with Jonathan Bailey in the middle. Oh, this is too much for me. And speaking of characters who aren't what they seem, shout out to Michelle Yeoh's Madame Morrible. Madame Morrible. Although if I had paid attention to her name, I would have seen the twist coming. But I was shook, actually. I didn't realize that Madame Morrible was working with the wizard. Like I said, I have seen the musical, but I don't actually remember what happened. So I was shook. I was like, oh, the plot twist. But yeah, I was fooled. I was bamboozled. I was led astray. I can hold my head up and say that. But Michelle Yeoh was brilliant, you know, as this character. And in the end, when she's playing on people's fears about Elphaba, the fact that she has green skin and the fact that she's already ostracized in society, making her a prime figure to be the enemy of the people, and she has that broadcast right through the radio. It's just vicious. It's vicious stuff. Her using all of Elphaba's struggles and fears against her just because she won't bow down to the wizard and do exactly as he says. Madame Morrible, you know, hell isn't hot enough for that lady. But shout out to Michelle Yeoh, because she did the thing. She absolutely nailed her performance. And the same thing goes to Jeff Goldblum, who for the second time this year is playing an all-powerful being who turns out to be the worst. Who literally turns out to be an absolute villain. We of course saw him play a very similar role in Netflix's Chaos. It still hurts. But here he's playing the wizard, who, I mean, we already knew that the wizard was not who he said he was, but having Jeff Goldblum play this character is just mwah, excellent casting, and he absolutely nailed the role. Now, aside from the excellent story and performances, there are a lot of other things that this film does exceptionally well. And first of all, let's not forget that this film is a musical. There have been quite a few musicals popping up over recent years, despite what these advertising campaigns may lead you to think. But this is a true out and out musical that is done exceptionally well. Now, when it comes to the music of Wicked, like I said, like I'm not the biggest fan. Like, I don't think the songs are like catchy enough for me to just like remember them off the bat. But I do, of course, know Popular very, very well. I knew the Mika version before I knew the stage version. Okay, and I've of course heard of Defying Gravity. Like I'm not that removed from the Wicked fandom. Okay, but otherwise, like otherwise, even if you put a gun to my head, I wouldn't be able to even hum a lot of these other songs, not gonna lie. But in terms of adapting the already existing stage musical, this film does an exceptional job. And it certainly helps that you have some of the best singers you have some of the best singers working today performing these songs. As someone who can't sing for shiz, I'm so jealous. Like I'm so, like the talent coming out of the how does that even And apparently John Chu, again, runner of the Marines, had them singing like live on set. And I think that made all the difference. Like, it just sounds so organic. And even with the way that their mouths were moving, their jaws, like you could tell that the effort was coming from their bodies. And again, I think that just made all the difference because the energy just changed and shifted. And just knowing that they were actually singing just made it far more convincing. So props to everyone involved. I'm just sitting here clapping, honestly, because I'm just blown away by people's talent, the talent that I unfortunately do not have. Anyway, moving on. And I really, really enjoyed the musical set pieces. Like, just, I mean, I've reviewed quite a few kind of stage to film adaptations in recent years, and one of my biggest issues with some of them is that they don't take full advantage of the new medium. When you're working with the medium of film or even television, there's so much you can do to create this larger than life world. And sure, it will cost you a bunch of money, but you can use these incredible sets. You can use CGI, which isn't the enemy, by the way, whatever, Twitter. But you can use all of these devices and tools at your disposal to create like this magical, wonderful world, which doesn't have to abide by the same rules as the three walls of the stage. And so when adaptations fail to do that, I get a little bit frustrated, but that is not a problem for this film. That is not a problem for this film, because the way that Oz and Shears University and all of these different places are materialized here is extraordinary. And I know that they used real life sets and props, and they planted a million different tulips and all this. And I think it made the world of a difference. But let's not forget, they also did lean on special effects and CGI. And I know that we like to act like CGI is the devil, but when used well alongside these practical effects especially, you can bring to life an incredible, imaginative, magical world that really shows the power of film and television as a medium over the stage. Now, I have sung the praises of this movie for almost an hour now, and so it seems like it was a perfect recreation of the stage musical. But if I did have one little qualm, it would be that it was a bit long. Like, it was a bit long. I was happy that they dedicated a good amount of time to explore these different characters and themes and whatnot. But by the final act, I did feel it dragging just a little bit. And I will say that the scene where you finally get Elphaba grabbing that broom and getting on there and flying out of Oz, it went on for like twice as long as it needed to. They kept showing Cynthia grabbing for that broom with her, again, talons, and kind of flipping her cape, putting on the hat. Like, it was really drawn out. And I know that it's a key moment for the character, and it's iconic and it's punchy, and you know, this is it. This is the critical moment where she becomes the Wicked Witch of the West. I understand that, but like, it didn't need to be like 15 minutes. Like, it could have been a cute little 7-minute situation. But that's all I have to say. That's all I have to say. But listen, overall, I had the time of my life with this movie. And so with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving Wicked a 9 out of 10. So that's it from me, guys. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Wicked, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this movie down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.